I see the live button on my screen. So here we are, Ovadia Heart Health, Monday, and very excited for my guest, Cecile Seth from Metabolic Multiplier. And we're going to get right to it today. But first and foremost, as always, we do need to let everyone listening in live or the recording that this live stream, like all of our live streams, is for educational purposes only. This is not intended as personal medical advice. If you're interested in having a medical consultation, working with the Ovadia Heart Health team, please email us at team@ifixhearts.com and a real live person will reach out to you. Welcome, Cecile.
Hello, great. I'm honored to be here. Thank
Y-
you, Krisna. I always
Yeah.
learn a lot whenever I speak with you or with Chris. So I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Oh, super. Well, there might be many of our listeners who know about your company, Metabolic Multiplier. However, there might be some that don't. Can you give us a little bit of the background of why you founded it, what you're currently doing, and any other insights that would give us a better understanding what you're doing?
Absolutely. So my background is I'm a community connector, a serial founder, ecosystem builder. And I just dive deep on information and the work and I make things happen. So that's my skill set. And I have a Harvard MBA, lots of strategy, marketing background. And after, maybe 4 or 5 months after my husband and I had started keto, and we started in October of 2017, so we're coming on 8 years. I part of it, there were two parts. One is I wanted to see how much of this was real, because the some of the stuff they were talking about then was circadian rhythms, and do I really supposed to go to bed at the same time every night? And I'd hear about fermented foods, and I wasn't really sure about all that. And I could do two things. I could either develop a core competence in biochemistry, or I could use my core, and we have a lot of clinicians and scientists with, deep knowledge there, or I could use my core competence and basically bring people together in groups and see who is respected among the peers within clinicians. A woman not named Adele Height that I'd met at a conference helped out. My co-founder, Christy Barnett, is a clinical psychologist. So we joke that between us, we have a whole brain, because she knows all the clinical stuff and I know the business stuff. Adele just put a call out like, hey, let's get organized. Let's bring this forward. And I organized people into common interest groups. So we had a veterans group, type 1 diabetes, etc., and worked. And it's basically what in business you would call, um, it's a business idea that you get people in common interests together, but it didn't happen as much there, and then produce different things. So we had a bunch of papers come out. And then second, I helped clinicians whom I met and liked and respected, with their go-to-market strategies, or basically to get a particular thing off the ground. So I worked with Christy and I did for about a year. We spent 3 hours every Saturday and did he was really kind of thinking through the concepts on his book. And I think we mostly listened and learned. But I think it was helpful for him to have someone to bounce out of his ideas off of. And we ran his social media, website, etc. And I've done that for a number of other organizations, SMHP for their first 6 months around their life launch. That's a Society of Metabolic Health Practitioners. And some doctors either set up their clinical practices with a go-to-market strategy, or podcast guests, etc. So that I've really enjoyed. Now, I am luckily in a position where I may be a little older than I look, and I have my retirement paid for. So this is really my giving back to the community. I'm done with the part of the work where I get paid for my time, and if it's in the metabolic health space, I am not taking any money or giving any money. these are my opinions and, who we think is really good. So there's no bias from company money, et cetera. It doesn't cost much to do a website. So that's my background. And now I'm also on a bunch of startup boards, and I have a directory of like, hey, who are the top folks that if you're looking for information that Christy and I, as moms of 20 something year olds and having, who are respected by their peers, respected by us. Um, and that's what that directory is.
Fantastic. Wow. There's a lot in there to dive into. Let's sort of, I'm going to pull out just a few nuggets. I just do want to help a couple individuals and people that you mentioned, just for our listeners who may not be familiar. I'm going to start with Adele Height. She is no longer with us, sadly, that you worked closely with. I have to say, in the beginning, I've been in this field, well, I call it officially since 2007, non officially, maybe early 2000s. But she was someone really I found inspirational, always great information. Towards the end, she was working with, I know, Dr. Brett Scher when he was previously with, the name is not coming to me. There was
Diet Doctor.
dietdoctor.com, correct. Just a little bit about Adele. I like to keep reminding people of some of our heroes early on.
Yeah, so she had literally written the therapeutic carbohydrate reduction guidelines, and then helped found the Society of Metabolic Health Practitioners. Got a bunch of people together at a conference in a room and said, hey guys, we need to work together and make this happen. Um, it was not published in a journal. She saw this as something that would evolve, a living document, and her dream was that as we learn more about the 40 plus conditions that we have published literature about this, that we would be able to tailor them to that. So one of the things that people had really asked for was type 1 diabetes guidelines. So she, towards the end, couldn't run that group, and frankly, she'd put it on pause because it was really hard. And they wanted to do a full literature review, et cetera, and that wasn't happening. So she asked me to pick it back up. So I dig in deep. It's like, okay, we didn't have the money for the Andrew Kutnick, brilliant scientist, to both pay rent, and he's type 1 himself, and do the research on the literature review. So we just said, okay, what can we put out? And we put out eating guidelines for dietitians. So that was amazing. And because if people knew how to do it, they were able to help people with because basically the law of small numbers is that if you eat less carbs, the roller coaster ride is smaller. If you eat a lot of carbs, the roller coaster ride is bigger, and you're going to have more hypo, which is like your blood sugar goes really low, or hyper, I guess, or really high. So basically, people are able to have much more normal things. The veterans group, she'd made a presentation. It makes me almost want to cry talking about it, to a veterans group. And there was basically a veteran there. And he's like, I have to take my motorized wheelchair if I want to get a second hamburger patty. Because of the dietary guidelines, I have to drive my motorized wheelchair over an overpass to the McDonald's to order more meat because they won't let me have more meat. And that's what keeps my diabetes in control. And I mean, with the stories like some of those, and she had also worked with Eric Westman, you can't not make that happen. And you may not know it, but the military, the Veterans Association, all those hospitals, CDC, et cetera, all the government groups all get something called the Federal Practitioner. So on their 40th anniversary, for the cover of that book, we basically put her therapeutic carbohydrate restriction guidelines into a published paper. They accepted it, they put it on the cover, and now it's legal. and okay for all these VA clinicians who had great results putting diabetes in remission in the VA system, but their coworkers would resist and say, "Hey, you're not following the guidelines," and try and get them in trouble. So they needed that legal coverage. So there's a lot of blocking and tackling as you talk to the different groups. I mean, my real question is like, "Hey, how do I help you as a clinician succeed?" And sure, I could be a front voice, but and I'm happy presenting and being in front, but I think we want the scientists and the clinicians to lead. And they're also, because then we get less muddling of, like, in the longevity space, it's like, oh, is this bigger order or is that bigger order? They're talking about the little stuff and missing some of the big stuff. So I think that and everything on my website has been vetted by these lovely clinician volunteers. Dr. Avadia helped us. Everyone was redoing the research. So we like, can we have one repository? So he kindly volunteered his time, as did Nick Norwitz and a bunch of other clinicians, and we organized, hey, how should we organize the conditions? How should it go there? Because I'm good at organizing people, but I don't know that answer. So you want their expertise, not my expert. I do what I'm good at, which is organizing people and connecting people. So my whip skills are okay. They're not brilliant, but we got the Nutrition Network, who have money coming in. They sell coursework to host a curated version. It's pretty, they keep it updated, which would be a lot harder. I couldn't have done the web for that on my own. So that's, one of the many projects.
Oh, the living example of how you connected with Adele is perfect example of the work that you're doing, connecting people, and then really inspiring to get the science behind it and in front of the right people. Having those recommendations for the veterans, for example, is huge. We know that many dietitians and the other nutritionists would like to incorporate, whether it's the low carb lifestyle, ketogenic lifestyle, now carnivore lifestyle, but they're restricted because they have to follow certain guidelines. So any ways we can help them with the science. I know you mentioned Nutrition Network. They're doing a lot of that with their book, Ketogenic, out there. Another individual, and maybe this kind of helps us, I've seen a lot recently of your work is focused on the realm of metabolic psychiatry, and that might be a new term for some of our listeners. You mentioned Christopher Palmer from Harvard. Maybe help our audience understand a little bit about what's going on in the metabolic psychiatry, and also how your company, Metabolic Multiplier, and for those who want that, we'll put that up on the screen, might be involved in this new exciting avenue.
So basically so Chris is a Harvard psychiatrist. He's a professor. And he's run their continuing education program for like 35 years. So he's seen what it takes to change practice. And he's real, I know, and seen what works, what doesn't, what voices, in terms of, he asked a lot of questions when we were doing a social. It was really, he did the Twitter, and we would then take it over to other places and build out the website. So I learned a ton from him, and strategically he's brilliant. But the outcomes for people with schizophrenia are horrid. So if you have psychosis, you like 3 to 4% become minimally defined functional. Like, you can pay your own bills and you can buy your own groceries. You're not like, you're not a big contributor to society. And my mom, my aunt, and a cousin had all had psychoses, and I'd grown up with this my whole life. And I've had 3 kids who were coming up on 18, which was the starting age. So I was scared that, hey, if this comes, what would I want to do? And my colleague had seen him speak, and she's has a clinical practice, isn't it? It's like a physician's assistant. They call it different in New York, advanced practice nurse. But she'd been in practice for 35 years, and she saw him and said, "Hey, can we help?" She came up afterwards. Is anyone helping you? He's like, "No." It's like, well, I can do social media. My friend can do websites. Um, so he came out with a book that was really very dense, and he intended it to be like Rachel Carson's Silent Spring. That's the book that uh that explained how bad DDT was, and she just worked on it and worked on it, so she dropped it all at once, and people, like, it was convincing enough, she'd anticipated everything, that everyone just accepted it. That's kind of what's happened with brain energy. I'll look at the criticisms. There's like, oh, the page breaks on the Kindle version aren't right. Or people, and he's basically saying that it all comes back to healthy mitochondria. And there's all of these mechanisms of action that we have over 100 years of data on, because they've been using ketogenic diets for epilepsy for over 100 years, and the pharmaceuticals wanted to put it in a pill, and you can't put you know exercise in a pill. You can't replace healthy living with a pill. They've tried. So they have great data, and most of the medications in psychiatry are off-label epilepsy medications anyway. So the psychiatric world is really coming around. It's kind of ironic that mental health, which is the stepchild and frankly affects far fewer people, is what has been bringing the low carb to the fore, because they have such bad outcomes, and everyone kind of knows the situation stinks. It sucks. So that was so that was my motivation. I worked with him. Christy and I was full time. She was close, for that year, really wanting to understand what to do with my own kids. So for example, with, my youngest, by then, I'm like, I care much more about you're getting a good night's sleep than you're staying up late and working on something. So with the last two. So really emphasizing that. And, I also put the control in their hands, which is um gives you a sense of purpose, and it reduces stress if you're in control. So I remember one night my son telling me, he had this big project due, and at 10 o'clock, he sent a picture of his partner was a DJ at some big stadium. He's like, I cannot start this now. I got to wait for him, Mom. So I'm going to be up late, which is fine, but, so I think, and then the other thing is that the other reason the metabolic psychiatry has really hit a note within the community is anyone who's done low carb kind of knows you feel great and peppy and high energy, and you just feel better when you're in ketosis or close to it. And a lot of there's a psychiatrist in Argentina who basically takes initial onset people. So they've got a little anxiety, they've got a little depression. They're first seeing someone. Chris Palmer sees treatment. You're at Harvard, so you've been through 6 doctors and all the medications before you get to him. And he just has people eat the natural meat and dishes that they have, and they'll get a lot better by just doing some intermittent, basically, hey, have some cheese when you're making dinner and wait till dinner, so he can put a lot more of these easy things in, because if you have a less bad condition, you can have a small, if nutrition is a prescription strength intervention, you can have a smaller dose of it and get better. Whereas if you've been diabetic for 20 years or treatment-resistant repression, then you may have to be in ketosis at fairly high levels, and may have to have a stricter diet. So it's fast. I learned so much from him. He's a great guy.
It's fascinating, and it's great, as you say, that they are sort of taking a lead. And maybe it's the surprise factor that people, we can tend to be in a bubble, whether it's the low carb world or the ketogenic world, not realize that a lot of people, that the ketogenic even comes from treating epilepsy back in the early 1900s, that it can also be a tool for treating other ailments, physically as well as mentally. So it's exciting. You've been in this forefront of this paradigm change.
And I would add that for both your individual practice and the companies is that as you well know, Krisna, very often there's a big knock-on effect for the rest of the family. So my kids were teenagers when we started. They didn't go keto, but they didn't need to. But they loved eating if it's a home cooked meal, they ate it. If there's leftovers in the fridge, those boys will just hoover up anything that's there. And if they want a carb on the side, they can cut a slice of bread, I mean, or make it if they want. So, but very often these young people, because of the food guidelines, et cetera, they're getting a lot of sugar, they're getting a lot of processed foods. And if you're helping them to have nutrient dense real food, you're encouraging the sleep. I came to realize my kids loved to walk to school. They liked it was fast, as fast as driving, but they always loved it. And it's like and one of my kids we tried to get him we were late, tried to get him in the car. He's like, no, 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 it makes my engine run better, Mom. And it's the sun, it's the light, it's the circadian rhythm, it's I now know all the science behind why they were right, but they just knew they liked it. So there is a big knock-on effect for the rest of your family, I
There's a
found.
huge knock-on effect. We see that. And just for individuals listening, here at the Ovadia Heart Health team, we have sort of two main components to what we're doing. We have our private medical practice with Dr. Ovadia, of which you can reach out if you're interested in talking with someone about our private medical practice. We have our employee wellness side of the company, where we're doing on-site programs across the country, right? We have a company we're working with in Pennsylvania, manufacturing company, a dental firm in Oregon. So we're spreading our wings out in that way. So please reach out to us if you're interested. And in fact, if you'd like to read our case study recently on our manufacturing company, you can download that for free. Back to that knock-on effect, I just want to kind of highlight that a little bit. We see things like, a patient who is incorporating our lifestyle in the medical practice, their daughter loses 20 pounds, right? Just by, sort of seeing what her mother was doing and finding it actually easy. I think there's a mystery about the low carbohydrate ketogenic lifestyle that many people think, oh, it's going to be hard or that. But there are many of us who find it pretty easy to do, whether we're on the road, and we'll get to that. I know you travel a lot, as does Raj, your partner. And we can't deny anyone the chance to try it. There is a lot of talk that it isn't sustainable. I'm going on year 18, so is my husband. Maybe next year will be unsustainable, but I kind of don't think so. We see knock-on effects, individuals, lowering their A1C, and then someone else who is pre-diabetic in the household is also getting their numbers in a good range. And that's why we're really hopeful that our employee wellness programs continue to grow, because the workplace is a great place to learn about metabolic health.
And two of the interventions are community and sense of purpose. And having a employer who is willing to talk and think about that, I think is tremendous. And speaking of knock-on effects, my husband and I did it together. I started for his diabetes, which he put very quickly in like a week. He was off most of his after 10 years off like 9 medications. But two of his sisters also did, and he's Indian, so they're Gen vegetarians. And actually, it's funny, if you look at if you just Google Gen fasting, it's like every kind of fasting that the fasting method suggests. So they're vegetarian, but they're combining fasting with it. And, you don't eat by dark. You are supposed to bathe and pray before you have breakfast. So, they have the eating windows, you have, days a week you fast. They have a whole bunch of different kinds of fasts. So it actually fits very well with their culture. And what I find really interesting is that if you look at any ancestral culture, it actually aligns with the metabolic stuff. So, um, many agriculture communities, you weren't cooking 3 meals a day. You had a late breakfast and and then an evening meal, and that, it was, and you had sugar. Cakes were not as sweet, and it was a special occasion. You didn't have sugar bathing everything. Um,
And
so
like,
so both his sisters did, and then my mom started having, at 86, she started having a lot of memory issues. And I'd been talking about this for 6, 7 years at this point. She's like, "Oh, no, no, no." But, we talked about sleep, and she'd get up every morning and exercise, and she lived alone. And then when she started having the memory issues, at some point the idea that every cell in the brain is mostly saturated fat, so if I don't take any saturated fat, no wonder that's type 3 diabetes, I get dementia. And she, on her living alone, was able to implement it and make tremendous strides, and was just pleased as punch, and told I'm on a keto diet in a southern accent. It was really sweet. But you can do it, when you're older, if you're still able to, cook real food, etc. But there is hope. If she can do it, we can all do it. So we
um,
lost.
oh,
Are
there
you
you
still
are.
there? Oh, there we
You're
go.
back.
Great.
Uh, we're calling them the valued octogenarians. We have quite a few. I have one in particular, 88 years young, just thriving, doing well. That it's never too late. I think that's a
Yeah.
wonderful story about your mom. Certainly, we're not advocating that the ketogenic diet is a cure for dementia or Alzheimer's, but we do see within the practice, and is one, lots of stories about individuals in those early stages who do quite well, who improve. If you want to dive deeper in that, Amy Berger's Alzheimer's Antidote is a great book. As well as you already mentioned, Christopher Palmer's book, Brain Energy, Dr. Georgia Ead's book, Change Your Diet, Change Your Mind. There's lots of resources if you want to go further into helping your brain. We have a couple comments here from the dog paw from a website Dr. Ovadia sent me. I found an integrative medicine doctor that might be the Society of Metabolic Practitioners that understands my carnivore diet. Appointment to meet them next week. Thank you. Wavo. Yes, it is about what Cecile's talking about here, community. So congratulations on your find there. So you mentioned community and sense of purpose. Um, there might be the cynics out there that say, all that matters are my lab numbers. I think one thing that really drove me towards the metabolic health community is this understanding that there's the science and there's the art, and the two need to be meshed. And we see that a lot also on your website of connecting, and that the stories, you and I talked about that before, stories matter. Your mom's story matters. Roger's story matters. Can you talk about that just a little bit?
Sure. I think, especially if you're the only one in your household. I mean, that's how I met Christy, the person I did Metabolic Multiplier with, is we went to a conference, my husband and I. She did it solo. I, as usual, kind of walked up to every stranger and said, "Let's get together." And, was talking to everyone, and I'm a little bit extroverted, just a little. And then she lives a few towns over. So we started a meetup. Other people had done meetups, and we met in picked a local diner. And first few times we invited other people, and people came and helped. And we kind of realized we didn't need anybody else, and we are still meeting regularly now. She's left New Jersey and moved to Wisconsin. But she didn't have another person to talk to locally. And that's where I think, so that's one of the things you need to find. If you have that in your family, great. It's my husband's now does most of the cooking. It's fabulous. And he makes great keto meals. And when he's home. And but you're going to need that, and that's where I think the magic bullet, if you will. I think employers and self-insured employers and companies, it's there's so many synergies. I think that is that's why I'm so excited about iFix Hearts, because you're really helping people to do that, and that has that community built in. And I saw it with my mom. She had mental health issues her whole life. And in the last, about 10 years ago, she took a master naturalist course and made some friends that had common interests. And one that started with one person in particular, and she had purpose, she had community, and she's running committee meetings and running, speaking and doing fairs. It's a nut, when she could no longer garden herself, and for her, it's really the biodiversity, native plants. And then once you understand metabolic health and sustainable agriculture, you realize it's just one big continuum. What's good for us individually is also good for the planet. You can either fertilize with petrochemicals, or you can with animal pee and poo. And we need to have those animals for a safe, for a healthy planet. So I saw it be transformative in her life in particular, and I've seen for so many other people. And if you look at some of the studies, like there was a study that being religious of any religion had like a 20% decrease in all-cause mortality. And like I talked to my aunt, and she's like, it's when you praise at night, it's basically a gratitude practice. You go to church. The service itself is basically a meditation. You see similar results with meditation. And she goes to the fellowship hour. It's built-in community every week and other things and people caring. So you see similar data for meditation. All these things kind of fit in together. So there's a ton of data for each of those individually and together.
That's fantastic. And I just put a little plug in. We're going to be speaking next week on our live stream with Ed Fashbald, who runs Ohio Ministries, and seeing what are some avenues that the metabolic health community can at least open some doors and help educate individuals via that avenue about metabolic health. And you're getting a big hand wave from Dr. Tony Hampton. Oh, what an honor. Yeah, it was lovely to see and hear Dr. Hampton at the last Low Carb San Diego. Always inspiring. Welcome to the live stream. We need to get you on here as well, Dr. Hampton. You have also a hello from Central Pennsylvania. I've been traveling out there many trips with our worksite wellness program in Hanover, Pennsylvania, with Precision Cut Industries. I want to touch a little bit, Cecile. This is also something you and I have talked about at various times. There can sometimes be a disconnect between the medical and the non-medical community, even though they might have similar goals. If it's communication or just the way things are expressed, one group feels maybe isolated from the other. A lot of your work is trying to bridge some of these communities together, or help build avenues where we can support each other. Any thoughts on that?
That's tough. And I run for the Harvard Business School Women's Association. I've been running a food first roundtable for several years now. And, um, you know, sometimes I have speakers, sometimes I'll do different things. But like, there's just so much information that the mainstream media is not picking up. Like we had Nina Teicholz, and someone who had a career, had run, for a very large company and had run names we all know of, and had bragged about, hey, I got the lard out of X, and realized, oh, what's considered, and had been very, very celebrated for it at the time, realized, oh, what's considered healthy now is completely different. Um, so one of the things I have considered is maybe I should put a presentation together for business groups for things like that. Now that we have Ovadia and some of the folks have the metabolic health providers are able to handle bigger companies. Versus, I mean, you actually go to Pennsylvania and do the on-sites, and one doctor can't do that. That takes an organization, and that you have published data, which is just outstanding. So I think that's one of them. But that is a tough thing. And basically, um, I was at a conference for the meat science conference, and they see us as mostly talking to our bubble. So, I think it's very important that we reach outside of our bubble. That's one of the lovely things I see Tony doing, is he's really, taken people that the groups he's comfortable with. For me, it's my alumni group. It could be whoever you're working with Peter Ballerstedt. He is a forage agronomist, I believe. I might get that a little bit
I
wrong,
think
but
that's official.
yeah, he's in there. He's close to that. So he's been working a lot with the meat science people and the herd, so whatever groups you were in, it could just be when I was at my what was it, arthritis aquasize pool class, and someone asked, like, because I've lost over 50 pounds and kept it off, like, how'd you do that? So I think, and what I have find is talking about metabolic health, and I don't talk about the food first because that's a little bit controversial. I learned that from that dietitian group I worked. They just don't mention it at first, and they'd have clients who'd lost weight and done a whole bunch of stuff, and they'd ask them like 6 months, a year in, am I doing a low carb diet? Like, yeah, you are. So, I
Yeah.
think leading with metabolic health, although part of the problem there is, then people aren't necessarily getting the full message. So,
And I think it's wonderful. We also have that philosophy of leading with metabolic health. And just as a kind of a, insider tip, something we found, so much of the health conversation, particularly in work sites, has been about losing weight. And for many individuals, that is a traumatic thing, or maybe they've their whole life been doing that. But the conversation around metabolic health just broadens that. And in fact, we do this often on the show, the 5 official markers of metabolic health: waist circumference, blood pressure, blood glucose, triglycerides, and HDL. Weight's not one of those. And this really gives a broader and something very interesting. And just share a little insider data. We had tremendous improvement in our fasting insulin numbers with our most recent worksite wellness with a dental firm that had ages from 20 to 78. And fasting insulin, they'd never really even heard of, right? And most doctors don't even test it. But we had many with quite high numbers that were really on the road, and they had normal fasting glucose numbers, but that insulin was rising and rising. So this is very exciting when you can have, a much broader conversation that is not solely talking about the scale. I want to shout out, someone's saying, hello, Krisna from Miami, Florida, an 18-month keto warrior with incredible health success. Maria. Hi, Maria. How wonderful that you're here. That's a success. That's, wonderful. And, just keep tagging on to that number 18. What would be, Cecile, some, I like to use the phrase low hanging fruit that from you got an MBA, you've done a lot of groups with businesses and companies. Where do you think that employers could take some action right away, right? That wouldn't maybe break the bank or anything like that, but they could just get going with.
I think for those markets, there's two. One is I think the community and sense of purpose. I mean, purpose, you spend a huge part of your waking life at work. So if you can feel like my what I'm doing matters. I mean, they had a study where they took cleaners and a hotel and divided them in two. And they did the same work they'd always done. Half of them, they gave them education on mindset and basically said, hey, you're getting this great exercise and how this is really good for you. And just them, and then the others got some other kind of education. I forgot what it was. But the mindset group, just by being told, how you're stretching and all the wonderful things that you're doing while you're cleaning, their numbers improved because they had a more positive mindset, which is that's the kind of stuff. That's why I formed the groups to see if people like, do the clinicians all believe this? And yes, they do.
Yes.
So,
And
so
I
yeah.
just chime in there. Anyone interested in that study, that comes from the work of Alia Crum, Crum, at Stanford. And it's a fascinating research. And I believe that intervention that she did on mindset was very short. It was, I want to
Yeah.
say, something like maybe 2 weeks, at most 3 weeks. And it was only less than an hour a day. I think it was not, and maybe even less. Um, but fascinating. In At the start, the women said they weren't achieving any exercise. They didn't realize what they were doing all day long was actually a lot of activity. I mean, look it up, Alia Crum. But yeah, this is a super good point.
And when I was a manager, I'd ask people, hey, what are your goals for the next year? What are you trying to do? And I had great results and great loyalty. And I like that stuff, clearly. Um, Not everyone wants to do that as a manager, nor does everyone want to be a manager who's in a managerial position. But if you can just help people to find a purpose, and community, I think that's tremendous. Now, and also the second thing I would say is that it depends for that company on what are the stressors in your environment. So I was asked for International Women's Day, maybe for some 1 month. This company has a monthly speaker come in, and I was one for 1 month talking about metabolic health. So I, wanted to understand what they were, and it was, they are uh, a digital first company, so everyone's remote, or almost everyone is remote, and they've done all their pathing there, and it's great and that brings us to this whole challenges of work from home versus in office models and going back and forth. So young employees really need mentors. And their mentors, the middle managers, are often starting families and arrange their lives around remote work. So they're the ones who are most want to be remote. And then places where people have made people go into work, they're like, I'm just Zooming because not everyone's here. So they make me go into work and I'm on Zoom all day. So in this particular company where they've done a really good job with the hybrid with the not hybrid, with the, I guess, remote work model. But I was talking to women in particular, but it would go for any young parents. They were having trouble finding mentors and getting, there are some things you need from being in person. So we strategized a bunch of stuff around that, so that is one of the things that people are having trouble with. And I hear from my people in my cohorts, kids are in their 20s, all of them are not getting the mentoring. They get this great internship and they're making all this great money and they're all excited and they don't learn anything. Or more likely, they go down a rabbit hole and they don't know they're doing the wrong thing because there's no one to check. Or they finish everything they have to do, and normally you just walk over and ask your boss or someone else, hey, what can I do to help? But they're not there. So that's been a real thing. I think that's one. Two, I've seen companies that there's just a lot of economic financial stress due to the economy. And so if that's what your employees are saying their biggest stressor is, then maybe you're helping people get Restaurant Depot, a membership that they can share and they can reduce costs there. I mean, there are a lot of creative different ways. And the third thing I have heard is with shift work and circadian rhythms. I know you've worked with that in Pennsylvania. And I have two family members who are professional pilots. So I have lived, they come home that first day, man, and they are jelly. And they don't even know that they're crashed out on the couch. I don't even ask or suggest anything the first day that they're, that they were home. So I think really it's what are the stresses that um, your job site is there, and there's a lot out there, and try and address those. And a lot of it is control. Like my kids, when I'm encouraging them to go to bed early or at a reasonable time, but if they feel okay, that's the only way I can do this project and I want to do a really good job on this project, and my partner hasn't started at 10 p.m. and it's due tomorrow, mom's not gonna, they've got that control, and the support. So those are a couple of the things I would have them do.
Uh, that's great advice, and it is really kind of getting to know. I like this idea of mentoring, and we found that also even in our metabolic health programs on site, the more you can help each other, like I said, in one particular company, the ages span from 20 to 78. We saw a lot of great mentoring and partnering with information going in both directions, not just the old guiding the young, but the young guiding the more mature people. And understanding also how metabolic health fits in all this, right? If you're not on the roller coaster of blood sugar, you're going to be lowering a little bit that stress level as well. What can you implement that kind of creates that stability over time? Again,
And
for
I
any
would say, to some of those folks that, I have known Dr. Avadia Phillip and Chris and Krisna for, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 years now. And I've never had a conversation that I did not walk away with an insight or something useful. So I think that would be really helpful. And the second thing is you've done a bang up job with your website, your white papers, your information, and like the email. Like I got an email from Dr. Avadia last night from the newsletter, and it had the chart with by your age group what your resting heart rate should be. I'm like, I've been saying I got to go look that up. I don't know what, I mean, am I good? Am I bad? What should my targets be? And here it showed up in my email. I was like, great.
fantastic, right? Sometimes timing is everything. Well,
Yep.
we
Yeah.
really appreciate that feedback. And again, if you want to know more about the great work that Cecile is doing, look her website, metabolicmultiplier.org. Remember that .org, not .com. If you're interested in knowing about our Ovadia wellness programs, reach out. We're really excited about what we're doing in that space, knowing that people spend a lot of time at work. You can also download for free our case study about our manufacturing company in Pennsylvania. And we have I believe we're up to 7 now. We have 7 white papers that we've published on various topics from mindset. And you'll see that study reference that we talk about in that paper, to resiliency, to sedentary behavior. And again, these are all for free. Just download them all. As we're coming up on our time here, Cecile, anything we haven't talked about that you feel you want to light the fire on a little bit?
Yeah. I think the main thing is that there's so many different things that if you look at the literature on habits and change, you're lucky if you can do 3 at a time. I can probably do 1. And I switch it up by month, so and it's not some big thing. It's just I'm ADHD, so in case no one had picked that
Mhm.
up yet. So I need to change it up anyway. And I put a pencil to paper. I just have a little dot matrix journal, and or you can put it on a calendar, and I give myself a check, or a dot, or whatever it is I'm doing that time, maybe with a colored pen. But for me, putting pen to paper really helps it, and I pick just a handful of things, and that I think are doable for that month. And it's been a long time since there was that much nutrition on it. It really, it's overwhelming at the beginning, maybe, but once you get in the groove, I'm trying to get my bedtime to be consistent. That's the one that's the hardest one for me, if I have to be honest. Um, and not when I have and I'm not trying to be, like 5 minutes difference. It's you still got to live your life. So I think you just pick one or two things and you work on it that's reasonable. And if that's all you can do right now, you know, and rain falls in your life. So that's nothing, that's normal. We have to do hard things. So it's going to be a journey. It's going to be ups and downs, and that's all part of it. None of us are perfect. So you just want resilience to be able to handle that better.
That is a very good closing tip, just to simplify it, and that's I think a wonderful thought for not only individuals. I'm the queen of the sticky note. I make a sticky note every day to keep me on track, um, but also for employers. The world of health, let's just put it that way, is overwhelming. The amount of information, what is even healthy, we could debate hours on end about that, but simplify it for yourself. And follow Cecile's advice here. Pick one thing, but you can change it up, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's important for employers. Understand where you want to start simple, and maybe it might even just be start with education. What is metabolic health? Yeah.
And the self-insured, I mean, I've looked and thought about this in many ways, but self-insured employers are the big thing, because the insurance companies, you're switching in a year. So they don't care. They don't want to make you healthier. No one else, the only group, two groups have incentive to make you healthier, is you and your family, and self-insured employer where you're working for them for a long time. Those are the two groups that have the most incentive to take this on. So I, I love that those are the two groups you guys are targeting.
um,
So,
Wonderful.
but the dollar returns are amazing.
Incredible, and it is the future. Let's hope. Well, this has been fantastic. I've had a great time. For again, our listeners, Cecile's website, she's doing all kinds of amazing things out there. Check her out, reach out. I'm sure there's a contact form on there for individuals who want to talk with you personally. And you mentioned Nina Teicholz. I'm
Yes.
super excited that this Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time, I'll be hosting with Dr. Ovidia Nina about the dietary guidelines. So come tune in to that as well. I already mentioned next Monday. We're trying to keep the doors of communication open for everyone, and keep doing what all the fabulous things that you're doing. Hope to see you in Arizona one of these days again soon.
Great. Well, too.
Yeah.
Looking forward to it. It's been an honor, an absolute honor, and great fun.
Fantastic. All right. Thank you for listening in, all who chimed in.
All right. Take care.